won the war, but lost his soul on the battlefield. General Nathaniel Rusk, the man they called the Northern Flame. They used to chant his name like it meant salvation. General Nathaniel Rusk, Union war hero, strategist of steel, and the man credited with turning the tide at Cold Creek Pass, a battle so brutal that the river ran red for 3 days. His tactics were ruthless, efficient, unforgiving, and that's exactly why they loved him. History called him a genius. The papers called him a savior. But the men who served under him? Some called him Butcher Nate. Not to his face, but in the dark between prayers and loaded rifles. Rusk didn't start the war that turned him into a myth, but he finished it. And when he did, he left behind a trail of victories and broken souls, including his own. He returned from war with medals on his chest and something hollow in his eyes, like the glory was real, but the man inside had been left behind somewhere between the cannons and corpses. They built statues in his honor, named a county after him. But the truth? He won the war. And it cost him his soul. They say General Nathaniel Rusk didn't blink when he gave the order. It was the Battle of Cold Creek Pass, 30,000 men packed into a valley with no way out but forward. The Confederates held the ridge. Union scouts warned that a full frontal assault would turn the place into a slaughterhouse. Rusk heard the warnings. He studied the maps. He saw the odds. Then he said, "Send them in." No hesitation. No prayer. The attack pushed through after 6 hours of blood and screaming. Rusk's maneuver worked. Barely. The Confederate lines broke. Victory, they called it. Newspapers ran bold headlines the next morning. The Northern Flame burns through the South. They didn't mention the 8,000 dead Union soldiers still soaking the soil. They didn't mention the 212 men who screamed for help until the fog covered them. They didn't mention the look in Rusk's eyes when he walked the field afterward. Silent, jaw clenched, stepping over what used to be men without saying a word. But they called him a hero, a legend. What they never told you is how quiet his tent was after the battle, how he didn't eat for 2 days, how he spent an entire night cleaning his boots from blood that wouldn't come off no matter how hard he scrubbed. They said he was focused, a genius, always thinking. But those closest to him, his aide, Lieutenant Fry, they knew the silence wasn't strategy. It was guilt pressed down like a boot on his chest. He wasn't always like that. Before the war, Rusk had been a schoolteacher in Ohio, soft-spoken, thoughtful, loved reading poetry out loud to his students. He'd once said, "The sharpest mind is the one that learns to listen." But the war didn't want minds like that. It wanted killers who could hide it behind a uniform. And Rusk, he adapted. Too well. He rose through the ranks fast. After 3 victories and 2 perfectly executed retreats, they made him general. They handed him battalions like chess pieces. He played the board better than anyone, but every game left pieces broken, not just on the map, in his own head. After Cold Creek, his face became legend. Posters, lithographs. His image sold to the public like a moral weapon. But back at camp, soldiers whispered a different story. They told of a general who stopped speaking to anyone at night. A man who wandered the camp in the dark, touching tents where men used to sleep, only to realize they never came back. They said he started writing letters to the families himself, every single one of the dead, dozens a day, until his hand cramped and bled. He never told the same story twice. Each letter carried some version of hope, sacrifice, glory. But none of them told the truth. Because the truth was this: he sent them to die knowing they wouldn't come back. One night, Frey found him outside, sitting alone in the mud with no boots on. Rain poured, his uniform soaked, his fingers trembling. Frey asked, "Sir, are you all right?" Rusk didn't answer. He just whispered, "Do you remember the boy with the red scarf?" Frey didn't know who he meant. There had been too many boys, too many red scarves, too many names buried without graves. That night, Rusk burned another pile of letters, ones he never sent, truth he never told, and in the morning he led his men to another victory. Just like always, another battlefield, another column in the papers, another piece of himself lost along the way. They cheered him again, but behind his eyes, there was nothing left to cheer for. The war was winding down, but the killing didn't slow. Rusk's final campaign was a march through Bern County, Confederate holdout territory, low on supplies, high on desperation. His orders were clear: no mercy, no survivors. He followed them, almost. One village, half-burned, starving people, mostly women and boys. His men prepared to torch what was left. Rusk raised a hand. "Leave them," he said. A sergeant protested. Rusk stared him down. The torches stayed unlit. It was the only time he disobeyed orders, and it was the only time he saw relief in his men's eyes. Not victory, relief, like they were waiting for permission to feel human again. But that night, he paid for it. He sat in his tent, staring at the fire, and whispered the names of the ones he hadn't spared. He kept a list, not of battles, not of promotions, but names. Young, old, soldiers, civilians, anyone who died because of him. The paper was stained and folded 100 times. No one ever saw it, not even Fry. And when the war ended, Rusk didn't celebrate. He rode into Washington in silence, face hard, uniform perfect, hands shaking just slightly, like his body was fighting to keep the mask on. The crowd cheered. A boy ran up and handed him a flower. He took it with a hollow smile. But when he looked down, he saw the red scarf again, the one he never figured out, the one that haunted him in every crowd. They gave him everything. Congressional Medal of Honor, Silver Star, a parade in his name, a speech from the president. General Nathaniel Rusk, the hero who broke the South's spine. They built a statue 2 months after the surrender. 15 feet of marble, sword drawn, eyes carved to look noble. They called it the Flame of Cold Creek. Tourists posed at its feet. Children tossed flowers at the base. But Rusk? He couldn't look at it. He visited it once, late at night, alone. Stood there, coat draped over one shoulder, hand trembling just enough to see. Looked up at his own face, carved in stone, and whispered, "That man never existed." He moved out of the city soon after, bought a house at the edge of nowhere. No staff, no visitors, just fields, books, silence. Fry wrote letters, no reply. Reporters begged for interviews. Rusk declined. He kept only 2 things in his study. 1, a faded photograph of his soldiers, taken before Cold Creek. 2, a locked drawer filled with unsent letters to widows, parents, children, all addressed, none mailed. He had a routine. Every morning, he'd sit by the window, read, or try, but most days he just stared at the hills, waiting for what he didn't know. Or maybe he did, because the war might have ended. But inside Rusk, it never stopped. The first time someone challenged his legend, it came from the inside. A young writer, Daniel Fisk, son of a soldier who died at Cold Creek, published an article in a regional paper, "My Father's Last March, the Cost of a General's Glory." It didn't accuse Rusk of war crimes, but it asked the question no one wanted printed. Did victory matter more than the lives it consumed? The story went unnoticed by most, but not by Rusk. He read it 3 times, then sat at his desk for hours, pen in hand, shaking. Finally, he wrote Fisk a letter. Not a defense, not an apology, just the truth. "Your father was a brave man. I knew his name. I remember his boots. He polished them every morning, even when he couldn't stand. I knew he wouldn't survive Cold Creek. I sent him anyway." He signed it, sealed it, then placed it in the drawer with all the others. He couldn't send it, because if he did, the legend would crack. And deep down, he knew America didn't want broken heroes. It wanted polished ghosts. Time passed. Years blurred. Rusk aged like a man on borrowed time. His hair thinned, his hands stiffened. But his mind never left the field. He could still hear cannon blasts in the quiet, still woke to phantom screams at dawn, still saw the red scarf in every crowd, every dream, every moment of stillness. He began walking to the old stone bridge outside town. Alone, no cane, no coat, just him and a journal. The same one he used during the war. Every few pages, just one line. "I sent them." Nothing else. One day, a reporter tracked him down. She was persistent, kind, smart. Said she wasn't there for gossip, just the truth. "You're a legend," she told him, "but no one knows who you really were. Don't you want to leave that behind?" He looked at her a long while, then said, "I already left myself behind." He didn't give her an interview, but that night he unlocked the drawer, took out the letters, all of them, and began to burn them, one by one. Watching names turn to ash, stories vanish, not to hide, but maybe to finally stop remembering. General Nathaniel Rusk died quietly. No family at his side. No ceremony. Just a caretaker who found him slumped in a chair, one hand resting on a faded war journal, the other clutching a red scarf folded into a perfect square. The death made the papers, of course. Northern flame extinguished. General Rusk dead at 61. They said he was a man of honor, a brilliant tactician, a national treasure. But none of the obituaries mentioned how he stopped speaking to the public 15 years before, how he refused every medal after the war, how he had no statues on his own property, only a rusted mailbox filled with letters no one ever opened. Fry came to the funeral. So did a few veterans. Not many. They stood in silence as the flag was folded and placed on a casket that looked far too grand for the man who once whispered to trees instead of people. After they lowered him into the ground, Fry did something no one expected. He spoke. Just 5 words. He won, but he mourned. Nothing else. And that was enough. A week later, a box arrived at Daniel Fisk's home. No note, no return address. Inside, Rusk's original field journal. A copy of the letter he never sent, and one final page, handwritten and unlined. Tell them I remember their names, all of them. Every man I sent. Everyone who never came back. I remember their boots, their jokes, the way they smoked before charging, the ones who cried, the ones who didn't. I remember every order I gave that took someone's son, brother, father. I won the war, but I never stopped dying with them. Fisk published the letter anonymously. It spread like wildfire. Some said it was fake, others called it cowardice. But the soldiers, the widows, the children, they understood. Years later, that statue in Washington started collecting dust. Tourists still came, but the tour guides spoke differently. Now, they mentioned the cost, the stories Rusk never told, the silence he carried. And in a quiet corner of a war museum in Ohio, there's a small plaque. No photos, just text. General Nathaniel Rusk. He led thousands. He saved a nation. But in the end, he just wanted to be forgiven. They still call him a legend, but now they also call him a man. And that's more honest than any monument ever carved in stone. And that was the untold truth of General Nathaniel Rusk, a man they celebrated in marble, but who carried the weight of every name, every face, every loss, all the way to the grave. Heroes don't always come home whole, and sometimes the greatest battles are the ones they fight alone, long after the war is over. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who still believes legends should be human. And subscribe for more powerful emotional stories history tried to forget. Thank you for watching. And for remembering.